Practice 3. Recapitulation. 1. Write down the entire event or situation from which you wish to withdraw your energy, re-examining it moment by moment, including every detail. Concentrate on one event, person, or situation at a time, focusing on the most problematic and critical areas of your life first. 2. When you have completed the writing, create a ceremonial fire and burn the entire work. Breathe the warmth of the fire in through your nostrils and down into an expanded abdomen. This warmth and glow is your energy, being freed and released by the flames in order to come back to you cleansed. 3. When the fire is just smoldering ashes, breathe in the last of the glow and exhale forcefully through the nostrils, pushing the abdomen in on the exhale and sweeping the head to the right. This exhale releases all attachments to the experience and scatters the ashes of it to be further cleansed and recycled by the earth. 4. Once the fire is completely out, collect the remaining cooled ashes and either bury them or scatter them over a body of water, saying a prayer of forgiveness and release. Chapter 4. Exploring Celibacy. The next morning, I could scarcely contain my enthusiasm. Neida and Pacha had gone shopping to prepare for the impending arrival of another guest. Doña Celestina was in consultation in her altar room, and Don Juan had gone to see a friend in town. In search of something to do to keep my mind off my excitement, I helped Chencha with her ironing. We were listening to Mexican ranchera music and to corridos as we dripped water from bowls with our fingertips onto the collars of blouses and steam-pressed them beautifully crisp. This corrido was about Cesar Chavez, an agricultural hero who had been born near Yuma, Arizona. I knew some of the words, so I sang what I knew in an exaggerated way and hummed the rest. Cerca de Yuma, Arizona. Chencha giggled, revealing a broken front tooth. I smiled back at her in wonder. She was perhaps even younger than Mala, 13 or 14, I'd say, though I didn't ask. She was Papago, from the area around Yapachik in the mountains of Sonora. Her situation was similar to Mala's, though it was hunger that had driven her from her village to take her first job working in the lettuce fields. She had met Doña Celestina in San Luis early one morning, not so long ago, while standing in near darkness, waiting for the workers' bus at one of the field hand pickup points. Doña Celestina had just been to the local bakery, which opens in the wee hours of the morning with the first batch of fresh baked rolls. Chencha smelled the bread in Doña's basket, and though she didn't intend for Doña Celestina to notice her desire, she did. Doña Celestina stopped on the corner and offered Chencha a hot roll, which she rapidly ate voraciously and gratefully. Admiring the girl's hunger, the Doña told her that she had some work in her home and that there would be many such rolls, that she would even teach Chencha to bake them herself. There was a room if Chencha wanted to follow her now, which she did without looking back. Pondering the story as I ironed, I couldn't help but admire the Doña's style. The old witch, with food in her basket routine, that was priceless. I could see the whole scene as though I were floating above it. Doña Celestina, the perfect crone. Chencha, the perfect hungry, innocent young girl devouring the hot roll, while the old witch rubs her hands in sinister anticipation. Want to follow me, young girlie? The difference, of course, whether or not Doña Celestina wants to admit it, is that she actually cares about these disenfranchised young women. And more than that, which, she will readily admit, she teaches them something useful. Surviving as an older Indian woman who has successfully lived on her own for decades could not have been anything other than a horrendous effort. Doña Celestina has volumes to teach to anyone who is willing to learn. Yet she always selects girls who are most in need, but who at the same time have the courage not to feel sorry for themselves. Despite my pleasure in Chencha's company and in my ruminations, the ironing didn't help the morning pass any faster. I kept thinking of Chan. about what time he might arrive, how he would appear in the southwestern desert, what stories he would have to tell, and if there was an ulterior motive for his visit, which, despite Don Juan's casual comments, seemed quite portentous to me. Chencha sensed my agitation, and, since we had almost finished with the ironing, she told me that the Doña had instructed her to invite me into the altar room if I seemed restless. I was astounded. I had never been present during one of Doña Celestina's consultations before. We had always talked about the work after the fact. Putting my ironing board and iron away first, I went to my room to freshen up, and then sat in one of the chairs outside Doña Celestina's consultation room, as a client was also doing. Not wanting to interrupt something in progress, I waited until the heavy wooden door opened and a short Mexican man exited. The female client, who was seated outside the door, looked at me questioningly. I rose from my chair and motioned for her to enter the dark workroom alongside of me. We entered, and I could smell the faint hint of smoke that I was not quite able to place. It had an immediate tranquilizing effect. Doña Celestina sat backed by her altar table, on which a tall, thick red candle stood burning. She acknowledged both our presences with a nod of her head, and motioned for me to sit to her left in a chair positioned unobtrusively along the wall. The client sat directly before Doña Celestina. This slight mestizo woman, who appeared to be perhaps 35 years of age, was very nervous and fidgeted under Doña Celestina's cold scrutiny. She held a rosary in her hands, which were folded discreetly on her lap. She quietly worked through the rosary and twisted it tightly around her fingers. Yes, Doña Celestina waited. The woman swallowed a huge lump of fear and stammered to speak. First, with all due respect, she paused, I want to say that I never would have come to see you, ma'am, if I weren't completely desperate. Her voice shook. I was raised a Catholic, you see, and I prayed to God over and over, but to no avail. Tears welled in her eyes, and her delicate features were stricken. A friend of my mother's told me about you, ma'am. It was she who suggested that I bring my problem to you. She stopped for a long moment as her jaw began trembling. Doña Celestina sat back in her chair and folded crossed arms below her chest. She sighed softly, glowering at the shivering woman, whose appearance was reduced to that of a naked child sitting in a cold wind. The Doña turned slowly and took the red candle off of her altar to place it on the floor between them. This seemed to warm the woman and give her the fluidity and confidence to speak more of her troubles. The light of the candle cast long shadows across both of them, exaggerating the blackness of Doña Celestina's attire and the pallor of fear worn by the woman. She struggled to begin again. I was a widow with 3 children when I married my second husband, she confided. We were destitute, and I felt that we needed protection from someone who would help provide for us. I was in love with my first husband, but I must admit that in the case of my second, I married without love. I was more attractive in those days, and he had work and was willing to accept the children. I let those details guide my choice. Now I see that I was so very wrong. It is from my husband that we most need protection. At first, it was just a matter of occasional beatings when he would come home drunk, and there were other women. I thought we could stand these things because he brought in the money for our household. I felt guilty that perhaps I was deserving of this treatment because I lacked passion for him. After each incident, I always went to the priest to confess and to ask advice, and I prayed that the love would come to me and that my husband's ways would mend. When my husband began to notice my 13-year-old daughter, I told myself that it was my fault. I tried to make everything just the way he likes in the home, and there was peace for a while. Then suddenly my daughter became sullen and withdrawn and refused to talk with me about it. The change showed in her personal appearance. She seemed ashamed, and frightened, and she wouldn't discuss it. Now matters have become worse. I am almost certain that he is molesting her. She says nothing, but my husband is more belligerent at home than ever. I feel that he has stolen her soul. She is whipped, empty, as though she were possessed. I went to the priest and accused my husband in confession, hoping that the church would intercede on my daughter's behalf. I think that the priest did not even believe me. Perhaps after all, he is just a man. He offered prayers to help me make the right decisions. I can't go to the police because I have no proof, and my daughter will not speak out. Besides, the police are all men. If I accuse my husband myself, he will beat us within an inch of our lives. And if I try to leave, well, we have nowhere else to go. He owns everything now. My mother is dead, so I can't return to her home. I'm sure that if I try to take my daughter away from him, something terrible will happen. I know he has threatened her. What do you want me to do? Doña Celestina requested somberly. I'm afraid to ask for your help. I fear I have lost my soul by marrying this man. I don't know where my desperation can possibly lead. What kind of help are you looking for? Doña Celestina pressed, with focused intent. I need for him to leave us, to go away from this place and leave us in peace in our home. I can get a job in one of the sewing factories. I know that I can. My mother's comadre, best friend, does this work, and she has been teaching me. I was told that you can make him leave us, that you are able to enter dreams, but you are afraid that I need the devil to do it. Doña Celestina completed her thought. Let me relieve you of that burden, my dear. I don't. Oh, Doña Celestina, you are able to help me then? Yes, bring me a personal article that belongs to your husband. I'm not going to tell you how I do my work, but during the night, while he is dreaming, I will bring him here and show him a few things, a few visitors into his dreams while he is asleep and while he's awake. When you return with the item, I'll also give you something to put into his food. It will calm him down, and he'll lose interest in sex, become more pliable. Eventually, he will lose interest in everything altogether, and he'll leave you. As for your daughter, an acquaintance of mine who is a healer arrives this afternoon. You should bring your daughter to see him tomorrow. I guarantee you the situation will resolve itself. The woman stood up so rapidly that the rosary fell to the floor. Overwhelmed with desperate hope, she cried, "Oh, thank you, Doña. Thank you." I rose to show her the way out and put my arm around her shoulders. She looked up at me through teary eyes that were beaming with gratitude. "She is the real thing, isn't she?" the woman affirmed. I nodded. After escorting her to the front gate, I reflected on how the recapitulation had completely cleansed my perception and energy, and had enabled me to participate in the consultation with clarity, sobriety, and a calm that never would have been possible, and perhaps most importantly, without judging. Juan always stressed that energetic cleanliness is an essential in receiving the appropriate empowerment and in the maintenance of the energy flow. I looked forward to discussing all of this with him when he arrived. I didn't have to wait very long, for almost as soon as the woman had walked out the gate, I heard the front bell ring. I ran to the door to let him in myself. "Juan!" I cried, opening my arms for an embrace. He stood there grinning in a canary yellow shirt, jeans, and sandals. Dropping his bag, he went for the hug and roughed up my short hair with his hand, gazing cheerfully into my eyes. "Come on in," I exclaimed. "Doña Celestina is in consultation now, and Don Juan is out walking, so I have you all to myself for a while. Let me get you something." Juan sat down in one of the rockers while I brought him a cool glass of fresh lemonade made with honey. Limeade. "How was your journey?" I asked, handing him the large tumbler. Long, dusty, and beautiful, he replied with a smile. Ah, he relaxed back and took a look around at the patio. Then his eyes came to rest on me, and he examined me curiously, as if I were a rare species of desert flora. What have you been up to in dreaming, my little doe? My awareness shifted to fully bridging the dream of Doña Celestina's patio, now that he was here. I giggled and told him everything, especially what had taken place since my arrival at Don Juan's house. It was obviously a delight for Chan to exact so much detail. He kept gently probing with his eyes and with his smiles, seemingly quite invigorated by the excitement of this visit. After satisfying his almost endless curiosity, he pronounced that I held the dream perfectly. I then recounted the recapitulation and narrated the morning's consultation, remembering the questions I had for him about it. Well, Merlina, he said playfully, as if happy to oblige, using the new name Doña Celestina had given me. I see that you're all grown up and discovering the connection between sexual energy, dreaming, and healing. He was putting me on and teasing me about my question. You really put an old man on the spot, especially after such a long journey. He rocked in his chair, feigning exhaustion. As usual, Chan's humor was joyful and completely dismissed any seriousness found lurking in me. I fluidly adjusted, rather than becoming off balance. It occurred to me that we were outrageous dreamers, that this was a dream we were dreaming awake. But somehow my intent shifted me, and I was more interested in what he had to say. He sensed this and shifted as well. I then remembered that perhaps his greatest capacity as a healer is to transmit joy within the energy and yet efficiently do his work. Your question is about energetic cleanliness. Am I correct? His tone became sober. I can tell what the Maya see, since I was born into that culture. We see that to serve as a day keeper for one's days in the calendar count, or as a lineage head for a village, or to be a Hemen, the highest order of healer priest, requires energetic cleanliness and potency, including abstention from sexual relations on those occasions when one serves in an extraordinary capacity within the community. This is in order to see and to bring the energy through in a pure form. Shamanic dreaming practices undertaken by the Maya, such as shifting or energetic healing work, require a lot of cleansed sexual energy, and they evolve it, arousing and transforming it upward. This is not to say that human relations are unclean in their best possible expressions, but they are entangled. A practitioner seeks to free up large quantities of cleansed energy for its evolution. His or her desire blossoms and expands to meet the energies that are presenting themselves, powers, spirits, openings into other worlds. Practitioners who care for one another share these energies in ways that also refine and evolve. This may be together, and it may become a love relationship with great mysteries, beingness, and creation itself. What happens is that the sexual response to energy definitely changes, and it is supposed to do so. The refined energies concentrate and begin to grow upward toward life and awareness, rather than toward death. That's an important point. Sexual energy is one of the primordial energies of creation and evolution. Unfortunately, though, for the ordinary person, by the time they find this out, if they ever do, their energy has already been used in producing the status quo. They are all used up. We both had to laugh. This is why I recommend to my male and female apprentices, as you know, he nudged, that they contain their sexual urges until something better comes along. We should be searching for expressions of sexuality that are evolved, long-lived, and ecstatic, not harmful. My personal preference is for dreaming. As Juancho has no doubt been telling you, it takes a great deal of sexual energy to dream, because dreaming accesses art and energy of creation. My other predilection, one not chosen by me, but with which I am in complete agreement, is for healing. These are the gardens where my flowers bloom, where my intimacies occur, private paradise that I encounter and sometimes share with others like yourself. Practice 4. Cleansing the sexual energy. 1. Explore the nature of energetic attachments that are created through sexual intercourse. These may be seen as fibers, like tentacles that attach your creative energy into the manifestational potential of your partner or partners. Ask yourself if you wish for your creative energies to be applied in this way. 2. If you desire to extricate yourself from an energetic entanglement of this nature, you must first, of course, curtail all sexual relations with the partner or partners from whom you wish to remove your energy. 3. A thorough recapitulation of each individual then follows. 4. Following the recapitulation, you must analyze the pattern that was created by the energetic fibers of attachment and why it was undesirable. Then you must strive not to repeat it. The recapitulation will give you a sufficient boost of energy to aid you in your task and in the disassembly of the pattern. 5. A period of sober celibacy following this, or loyalty to a very intimate and trustworthy partner, coupled with additional recapitulation, will further cleanse, disentangle, and renew the energies. Chapter 5. Retrieving our lost energy. After Don Juan returned from his walk around San Luis, and Doña Celestina had finished her consultations, which she only took during the days beginning each week, we all put ourselves to the task of preparing a feast in honor of Chan's arrival from the Yucatan. Pacha and Neida had bought several chickens, which we prepared Yucatecan style, by surrounding them in yams, mangoes, papaya, onions, tomatoes, and spices, wrapping the mixture in fresh banana leaves, and setting it all to steam in a clay pot until the meat is so tender that it falls off the bones. The atmosphere became very festive, almost exotic, with Chan's distinct presence added to the group. Neida, Pacha, and I began dancing as we mashed black beans to make refritos. There was laughter and storytelling from the patio. At twilight, the meal was almost ready. We set up the heavy wooden table under the patio portico for the guests, and another smaller wooden table in the kitchen for the 4 girls. The food was so delicious that everyone concentrated on savoring it at first. But later, as appetites dimmed, Chan began to grace the table with more of his delightful tales. Some were funny, others were serious, dealing with impending Mayan revolution in the state of Chiapas. The best by far had to do with the famous transsexual show queen by the name of Euphemia, who happened to once have been a patient of Chan's. The story goes that Euphemia was born Eufemio to a Mayan family in a Yucatecan village often visited by Chan. After Chan had left Guatemala due to the massacres of Maya there, a poor little boy of almost otherworldly beauty, Eufemio preferred to learn household chores with his mother and sisters rather than to go out and run with the other boys of the village. This was not a problem for his family or for the other families in the small town. However, when Eufemio was 6, his father took a job making hammocks, in the large city of Mérida, capital of the state of Yucatan. His father moved the family there, and Eufemio had the opportunity to go to school. On the first day, the teacher asked the boys and girls to line up separately, and Euphemia lined up with the girls, insisting that he was one. The children all laughed, and the teacher tried to force him gently into the other line. He resisted tenaciously, telling her that it was she who was making the mistake. The teacher complained to Eufemio's mother when she arrived, walking from their little home to the primaria that afternoon to pick him up. The family was distressed to realize that it was not merely a matter of preference. Their child didn't recognize the difference between himself and little girls, and did not seem to grasp the concept of male and female. At the first opportunity, Eufemio's mother sought out a shaman healer priest for the child to talk with. She found Juan at the Indian market, behind a stand, selling his herbal remedies. At first seeing, Juan realized that the boy was exceptional. Upon scanning his body energetically, talking with him, and later watching him grow and develop, Juan came to the conclusion that the young person was more female than male. The idea of judging wasn't in Juan's vocabulary. He simply advised Eufemio on numerous matters and often did limpias, energetic cleansings, to remove the negative effects of the teasing that the boy constantly received. They spoke about aspects of female warriorship, and Juan taught Eufemio not to indulge in drama. By the time he had turned 15, Eufemio was a stunning beauty, outshining many of the girls he associated with. One night, while walking home from the cinema, he was attacked by a group of adolescent boys, and after that resolved to run away to a place where no one would know his personal history. He decided to flee to Mexico City, lose himself in the multitude, and live life as a woman, without anyone there knowing that he possessed a penis. Life was not so easy at first, but Eufemia's beauty was undeniable. The Mexican men suggested that she become a showgirl in one of the flashing clubs of the Zona Rosa, not realizing that unclothed, she possessed no breasts. Finally, Eufemia realized that she would have to face her ambiguous sexuality, and she did what she was able. She became a showgirl in a drag review. From time to time, when Juan came through Mexico City on his way to the nearby town of Toluca to trade herbs at the Tuesday Indian market there, he would look Eufemia up to make sure she was all right, and would bring news of her home to her family when he passed through their village. Her fame as a drag show queen slowly began to rise, even though straight Mexican men sometimes saw the show for a laugh, or so they said. Both they and the gay men who frequented the club had to admit that Eufemia was prettier than any of the real women on stage at the other nightclubs. When Juan would pass through town, he would say prayers to the 9 Mayan lords of the night for her success. Success became Eufemia, and eventually the review was invited to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, for a guest appearance. The audience and the club owner fell in love with Eufemia, and so she was able to remain in this more cosmopolitan environment, where she increased her earnings 20-fold. Eventually, she was able to finance a complete sex change operation. The best at that time were done in Brazil, and when she finally returned to Mexico, it was a svelte yet exquisitely curvaceous and dignified female. When Juan saw her again, she was the star of an all-female gala in one of Mexico City's top straight nightclubs. She thanked him profusely for all he had done for her, and told him that if she could ever return in the favor, she gladly would. Several years later, she had the opportunity. At that time, a political official of the state of Jalisco, who had heard of Juan through a young friend, a Mexican anthropologist who had worked among the Maya and now lived in Mexico City, requested an appointment with Juan while they were both in the capital. To Juan's dismay, this self-inflated politico boasted of how he had seen his young wife through breast cancer and a double mastectomy, thanks to his financial in with the Mexican government. Now he was going to buy her new breasts so that she could feel and appear as beautiful as she once had been. He was actually there for a primicia, a Mayan ceremony of blessing upon a new venture and upon the health of his wife, in that order. Chan told him that he would be happy to work for the continued well-being of the young woman, but wanted to know why new breasts were required. Hadn't she been through enough? The government official told Chan in no uncertain terms that the new breasts were necessary in order for him to demonstrate his continued affection for his wife in the most intimate manner possible. At that point, Chan laughed in his face. "It doesn't bother you that they'll be artificial?" he asked. The man replied that it did not, but that the reconstructive surgery was complicated, and it was for this reason that he had requested the blessing. At this point, Doña Celestina interjected. "I'm surprised he didn't ask for a blessing on his pecker to help him raise it up. I get that request all the time." We were all falling out of our chairs and pounding on the table as Chan tried to continue. I couldn't help but think of the look on the face of the Mexican man who had been leaving Doña Celestina's consultation room before I entered that morning, wondering if that was what he had been up to. And that if it was, no doubt Doña Celestina had shrunk him like a spider on a hot stove. Chan covered his large smile with his hands, took a deep breath, shook his head, covered his eyes, and then his ears, and finally, after recovering himself, began to recount more of the tale. "Very well," he told the man, "but before I do the blessing, there is an acquaintance of mine that I wish for you to go see. Her name is Euphemia. She is a famous nightclub performer, very beautiful. She once had the operation you are speaking about, and is as attractive as the most desirable woman on earth. She will do me a favor and show you her breasts. They are a work of the gods. If you are able to get excited, then I will be satisfied and do the blessing for you." The politico was practically salivating as Chan wrote down the posh address for him and gave him instructions. "Don't visit until tomorrow at about 2 p.m. She performs at night and likes her sleep in the mornings. I'll phone Euphemia personally and ask her to be expecting you." I braced myself for the story of this encounter, which I knew would send us all to the floor. The next afternoon, the married politician arrived at the luxurious high-rise apartment building where Euphemia resided, bedecked in his best suit with brilliantine in his hair. He was ready to inspect the breasts, and perhaps a little more. His wife would never know. Perhaps this was God's way of paying him back for all his kindness toward her during her illness. He rang the front bell and spoke through the intercom to a liquid, deep, and sensual female voice that buzzed the main entrance electronic lock open. He knocked at the door of Euphemia's 15th floor apartment at exactly 2:05 p.m. and was greeted by a tall, slender, graceful goddess in her early 30s. She was mesmerizing, more than he had ever expected. He was entranced by the quality of her bone structure, her exquisitely chiseled features reminiscent of the classic Maya, with large, upturned, deep brown eyes and lustrous, long, blue-black hair worn in a loose, almost Roman fashion. She had the legs and hips of a young deer as she walked across the beautifully furnished living room in a pale gold silk dressing gown. He sat down on the soft sofa and gazed up into the promised land. The breasts, oh yes, they were beautiful, perfectly sized, rounded, pert, and firm. Everything Chan had promised. Euphemia did a bit of her act for him, dancing in the silk dressing gown, hinting at revelation until he was practically beside himself. Chan has told me that you want to see my tetas, she said seductively. The politico nodded eagerly, almost without control. Sí, sí. Ask nicely, she teased him coyly. Sí, por favor, he begged. Euphemia disrobed in one fluid stroke and was completely naked underneath the silky garment. She stood stately, revealing a slender body that appeared to have been blown of amber glass into a subtle, almost hourglass shape to hold the most exotic of all wines. The politico's eyes popped and his tongue wagged. Ay, mamacita, mi diosa, he crooned. She approached him. Would you like to touch me? She invited. Touch them. He reached out and felt her breasts, which were soft and supple to the touch. Natural, he said. They feel completely natural. Now touch my cuca, she bade him. This was more than he could have hoped for. She was inviting him to caress her vagina. Does it feel natural? She asked him as he stroked her. Oh yes, he groaned, very natural. It was obvious that he was extremely excited and had achieved a hard erection, which she felt gently and approvingly with her hand. Chan will be glad to know that you were able to become so aroused. Make love with me, he pleaded. You make love to me, Euphemia responded as he rapidly removed his trousers. He was practically on top of her when she said, Don't worry, querido. You will be able to please your wife like a macho. The same doctor who gave me my tetas also gave me my cuca. And look how hot you are. You take her to the best surgeons and you'll have no worries. Would you like the name of my doctor in Brazil? What? He gasped, dumbfounded. Euphemia just smiled sweetly at him and repeated, The doctor who gave me my cuca, you know. Ay, Dios mío, the politician shouted as he struggled to get dressed. That brujo bastard has made me worse than the stupidest cuckold with his tricks. I'll get him for this. Don Juan howled with laughter. I heard cackling from the kitchen. The girls had been eavesdropping. We all broke into insane whoops and shouts. Chan finished the story by saying that Euphemia then stood up defiantly, putting on her dressing gown. You'll do nothing to Chan, or I will announce to the prensa that you were here wanting to make love with me today, she shouted. Euphemia left the room and instructed her maid to politely show the man out after he had recovered himself. To hear Chan tell it, the politico showed up at the herb stand later that afternoon, almost at closing time, shouting, Tio Chan! Tio Chan! Tio means uncle, but can sometimes be used as a derogatory familiar. She has an artificial vagina, you disgraceful old wizard. Chan smiled and told him that based on Euphemia's comments, he would now be happy to include the blessing upon the artificial breasts in his wife's primicia. We couldn't take any more laughter. Our sides were splitting so that even Doña Celestina was doubled over as she walked to the kitchen to ask the girls to clear the table. We retired to our rooms, still snickering to ourselves and repeating lines from the story. Chan's bedroom was the next one down the passageway from mine, with Don Juan at the head of the passage on my other side. Doña Celestina had her bedroom off the consultation room, separated by a small hallway. This afforded her the facility of working on trabajitos late into the night, if she so desired. The sense of all of us under one roof was positively electric. My dreaming was like a long cruise into pure energy. The next day, rather than going to El Tecolote to trade herbs, Chan spent the entire time with the daughter of the woman who had come seeking Doña Celestina's help the day before. He worked on the shy young girl in a vacant back room behind the patio, in the section of the house where the Doña's girls slept. I could smell copal burning and knew that he was doing limpias and counseling her. This gave me time to converse with Don Juan, since Doña Celestina was now also occupied with trabajitos for her clients. Chan's story about Euphemia brings up a question, Don Juan. I proposed. What question is that, muchacha mia? He replied as he watered the papaya tree from a large tin bucket. After listening to Chan and dreaming with all of you, I realized that sexual energy has much more to do with our lives than we are allowed to express in our conventional, repressed modern culture. You're just now realizing that? He joked. No, not really. But what can an ordinary person do to get out of all the traps, the repression, misuses, and abuses of our sexual energy that are condoned and promoted by society, by our religions, our values, our materialism, our own fears? The first thing a person can do is not go crazy, he responded, putting down the bucket. This is potent energy, a serious situation that requires sobriety. Let's sit down and we'll talk about it. We walked over to the nurturing and familiar rockers. One thing that people have to do is to recapitulate the energy they have been given by their parents and ancestors, replete with all the powers, misconceptions, and misuses there may have been. They must evaluate how that energy was spent before conceiving them. What was its condition, and what portion of this was passed on to them, so that the blessings, imbalances, and depletions may be uncovered. Then they must look at how they have spent and possibly misused sexual energy themselves, with relation to themselves and their intendeds, in whatever configuration that may be. If they have children also, what portion of their dose of energy was passed on, and in what condition? In all of these cases, once the nature of the beast has been carved out, it can be offered up to the flames, so to speak, disassembled, so that the energy may be called back at the proper moment, cleansed, and in its rightful configuration. For example, I constantly see mothers and fathers who don't retrieve their energy from their children at the proper time. The portion of energy that a parent contributes is lent to the child, like support sticks that are placed around the seedling so that its trunk will grow to be straight. At the proper moment, the parents may retrieve this energy. They must, in fact. Otherwise, the supports will cramp and possibly deform the growing offspring. What often happens instead is that parents fail, for whatever reasons, to remove their energy. This forces the young adult to carry a portion of the parental energy as a burden. For once adulthood is reached, a healthy human can be fully endowed with the energy allotted to it by creation. I even hear parents say, "I'll live forever in you, son, and in your children, and in your children's children." This makes the parents weak and clinging. Rightly speaking, they should live on, in themselves. This is an insidious tendency that creates both parents and children who are dependent. No one ever grows up and wants to change it. Everyone is a cripple by choice. Codependency is what psychologists now call what you are referring to, I mused. They say it, but they don't see it, and that means they don't retrieve the energy. In so doing, one may find exquisite expressions for it. Ceremonies and acts of power may be undertaken to retrieve lost energy, but one must learn to acknowledge the value of that which is so naturally illuminating, and yet so hard won once lost. I can now see that each of us should share our own lessons with you while you are here. Perhaps our tales and practices will guide you in your own evolution and the quest for healing. I am certain that Doña Celestina and Chan will be delighted to oblige. There is much to learn, much to express, Merlina. Life and death. He got up from his rocker and rubbed my head on the way to his room. Practice 5. Retrieving lost energy. 1. Examine areas of your life where you invested energy that should have eventually been returned to you and was not. Examples might be a dysfunctional parent who continues to hold your energy in an abusive manner, or a child whom you cannot stop babying. 2. Perform a thorough recapitulation of the person or persons without informing them that you are doing so. 3. Intend a dream in which, with a single act, you recover all lost or misplaced energy from said individual. Bridge some element of that act into the waking world. For example, if you dream that you touch your father's left shoulder and your energy returns to you via the force of your intent, find some occasion to touch his shoulders in like manner, mindful of the silent power of intent, and feel that the act is completed. 4. Examine any behaviors of yours which encourage the individual to reactivate the pattern and seize them. This will squeeze off the fibers that connect them to you in an undesirable way. The fibers will wither and the individual will be starved of the energy they were utilizing. Chapter 6. Drawing and releasing energy in nature. The next morning, everyone seemed to be aware of the game plan. Chan was up and waiting for me after I finished breakfast. "It seems that it's my turn today," he grinned. "I don't know when I'll get to El Tecolote. I may be here for days. Let's go take a ride in the desert and look at plants." We walked behind Doña Celestina's house to the area where I had parked the Jeep and got into the front seats. Chan was carrying several collecting sacks in case he came across medicinal plants. He instructed me to drive east on a dirt road out of town that headed straight into the desert. We started off. Driving with Chan was new to me and very different from riding with Don Juan. While Don Juan was always serious while we were driving and frequently used the time for discussions, Chan, on the other hand, rode silently, and somehow there was a carnival-like atmosphere to his being a passenger. I found it difficult not to drift into reverie and felt as though we were floating off into the rising sun. We stopped about 15 miles outside of town in an area where there was definitely some underground water, judging by the mesquite trees and bushes. "I see some jojobas already," Chan said as he got out of the Jeep. When I stepped out to my side, the first plant I spied was an aggressively large Jimson weed, also called the datura plant, or toloache, growing not far from a mature, shady mesquite. The datura plant seemed to concentrate my attention. Despite my efforts to interest myself in the plants of the surrounding area, I kept returning my gaze to it. "Toloache," Chan commented, pointing to the datura as we walked around to my side. "She likes you. Can't you smell her from here?" I could in fact discern what I would have described as an itch in the air, seemingly coming from the breeze that blew directly behind the hardy plant. "Let's walk over there," Chan suggested. The plant was not in bloom and was wider and lower to the ground than a male plant would have been. The stalks were obscenely thick and covered with plentiful bunches of leaves and spiked round seed pods. "Datura is really a woman's plant. So I'll begin with you here," Chan said. "A tea made from the leaves will bring a woman into heat, and a paste of the freshly ground leaves rubbed on the body will produce a flight of the energy body, often used by witches for pleasure, vision, and to strike at an enemy." Chan knelt down to show me a thick cluster of leaves. The Maya smoke the leaves in a ceremony to divine or to dream the location of lost persons or objects. We also drink a tea made of Calea Sacatequechichi, which grows only in Chiapas for the same purpose. In the ceremony, the entire community drinks the tea and enters into brief but intense periods of dreaming, induced by the plant, followed by involuntary awakenings, during which time we discuss the information we have brought back. When the Hemin smokes datura leaves, it is done alone, and during or following the smoke, or in dreaming later, sight of that which is lost will come. The shade of the mesquite tree became very inviting as its leaves rustled in the late autumn breeze. Chan and I both sensed this, and after sweeping 2 spots clear of leaves and rubble, we sat down underneath the tree with our backs against the trunk. Nature is overflowing with vital and sexual energy, and a practitioner can avail him or herself of this by allying with elements of the natural world. Elements such as wind, sun, water, earth, metal, stone, plant life, and creatures. Chan continued. There are infinite entry points in waking and dreaming. Everything from basic acts such as eating, drinking, breathing, walking, bathing, and sunning, to sophisticated supplications, invocations, and mergings practiced by shamans and healers. One way that a healer learns about the curative properties of plants, for example, is through dreaming. Let's say that someone comes to me with an illness that I have never seen before and cannot cure at the time of their visit. Chan gives me a nudge. I supplicate to the forces and spirits to show me a vision of the cure in dreaming. If it takes the form of a plant with which I am not familiar, I must then bridge my dreaming and go out into the world, stalking the plant. I silence my mind and allow my energy body to guide me, pulling my physical body along as if by wires. I soften my gaze, enter into dreaming awake by opening my dream at the moment of the revelation, and just wander through the jungle or forest until I find the plant. When I find it, I express thankfulness and make a request of the plant spirit, explaining my dream and my search. Then, in order to receive the methods of preparation and administration, I fall asleep at the sight of the newly discovered plant and enter into dreaming again with my intent. Once I have been blessed with all the knowledge I seek in dreaming, I then awaken and ask permission of the plant to take some of it and prepare and administer it in the ways I have been shown. Upon returning to my home, I always place a portion of what I have taken on my altar, not to be used as a medicine, but to be a representative portion of the plant entity to whom I wish to send blessings. I then instruct my patient in the ways they are to administer their cure, according to what I have dreamed. If they are very ill, I follow those instructions myself and administer the medicine along with any other treatments or ceremonies I may have dreamed. Each night during the curing process, I dream the patient well and seek to open those dreams with the patient each time we interact in the waking world. Listening to the passionate, intimate nature with which Chan approaches healing, I understood why power had selected him as a natural healer. My eyes were moist when he finished talking. I want you to try the same thing, he said, as he got up from the ground, dusting off his backside. This Toloache has a message for you. While I scout around for other plants, I would like for you to fall asleep here, under this kind tree, near the plant, and let her talk to you. See if she will share her strength with you. She is powerfully sexual and a survivor. Remember, when making an ally, always share something in return. Chan left me one of his sacks so that I might have a place to lay my head. and I curled up on my left side, under the mesquite tree, facing the plant as he walked away into the desert. I've never had any trouble falling asleep. Rather like a cat, I find that I can luxuriate in deep relaxation until it becomes ecstatic. Don Juan once remarked to me that felines are outstanding dreamers who know how to draw energy from the sleep state. Unlike many creatures who awaken sluggishly, cats will sleep up to 16 hours per day, and yet they are one of the most agile, supple, and powerful of all nature's creatures. Within minutes, I was snoozing pleasantly in the morning sun filtered by the overhanging branches of the large mesquite. I dreamed of yawning, awakening, and opening my eyes to find that the large Jimson weed was growing in my direction. The plant extended itself toward me and scuttled across the ground by sending out tentacle-like feelers covered with leaves that enveloped and eventually swallowed me. I was moving through the interior of the plant, much like a whole egg moves through the body of a snake when swallowed. Green hemoglobin flowed around me, and everything I saw filtered through a greenish hue. Deeper and deeper I went, being swallowed into the heart of the plant, the fragrance of weed and spice permeating the dream. When I arrived at the heart, my legs became the roots, my arms the branches. A trumpeting white flower sprouted as my head and my ovaries turned in on themselves to become spiked, rounded seed pods. I spread like a starfish in 5 directions and felt a throbbing and pulsing as life force poured into my body. A sensation of warmth accompanied the feeling of flight, and I could take in air as if my entire being had transformed into giant lungs. Fire from the molten earth began to flow in through my feet. The very tips of my roots and my abdomen received a cool wellspring of water, drinking, gurgling, feeling, and circulating the life-giving crystalline cleanliness. The fragrance became known to me as my potency, my hypnotic state, my bewitching essence. I felt this as I became one with the plant, truly became its entirety, and I remembered Chan's words, that I should give something in return. It was a difficult task, for I had come naked with nothing, and then I thought, a song, yes. The stamen of my flowery head became my golden tongue, and I sang as sweetly as ever I've sung in my life. The words were unknown syllables filled with tone and vibration, the melody haunting and evocative. I began to awaken as I sang. Chan was sitting beside me under the mesquite tree with a full sack of plants. "Nice singing," he commented to me and rubbed my head. I was drifting in and out, as if reminiscing a romance. As we walked to the Jeep and started the slow drive back through the desert along the dirt road. "You should keep that song," Chan finally said. "Always sing it to Toloache when you need to elicit her favors or when you wish to empower her effects. Just as you merged with her, so you may merge with other elements of nature if they allow it. It is important to always receive an invitation first, or to ask permission and receive it. This is foremost. Many clumsy seekers think that they can go in anywhere without requesting permission. They get punished for it. Never do such a thing. There is no romance or respect in it. It costs nothing to ask permission first, and there is everything to gain." When we were about half of the way along, Chan spied a group of boulders that also seemed most inviting, and again he instructed me to stop the Jeep. We got out and walked toward them, this time leaving the plant sacks behind in the locked vehicle. The outcropping was a rather phallic grouping of smooth, standing stones. One had fallen on top of several others, creating an overhang, an enclosed rock shelter of sorts. Before we proceeded any closer, Chan instructed me to feel for permission to approach and possibly enter the enclosure. A response came as a wave of pleasant, nurturing feelings. Chan said that if the sight had refused, perhaps I might have felt a sense of revulsion and eerie mystery, or perhaps a sensation of uncleanliness. We entered through a space between two of the standing stones, which formed an irregular circle topped by the fallen stone, and found that the ceiling stone was a panel of rock art. Shaman figures, rattlesnakes, deer, and even a bighorn sheep scurried and danced happily across its surface. Judging by the shape of this structure and the pictographs, Chan began as we seated ourselves within. This seems to have been a Vision Quest site. I'm sure Don Juan would agree. In fact, he probably knows about its historical use. What I can tell you is that spots like this were used in ceremony when a particular practitioner would isolate him or herself and seek to merge with the rock, to go within it and learn from the spirit inside. Often as well, the spirit was enticed to come out. The ceiling panel here, he said, pointing above our heads, was a kind of Stone Age cinema. The seeker would lie or sit back and gaze into the surface of the rock with a soft focus and a silent mind. The isolation would let the world stop, and through serious gazing and unbending intent, the practitioner's attention would shift to the life within the rock. This was done easily by those who never made the mistake of seeing stones and mountains as dead matter. Rocks, crevices, and caves are portals into other realms of earth, and mountains are the abodes of spirits. Lizards, like this little fellow here, are the go-betweens of the realms. A small chuckwalla stopped and peered at us before racing across the earthen floor and into a crevice between two of the stones. Snakes, as I know Juan has told you, are the guardians. Males seek to enter into the rock in feminine places and then go toward the masculine. Hence this womb-like enclosure on the inside, formed by erect stones on the outside. The Maya have similar initiation chambers in underground caverns. The cave and the water flowing within her are the feminine properties, as well as the snake guardians within. The rock surfaces and the fire a shaman brings with him are the masculine, although the fire beneath the earth is female. Together, they can make steam, life, gold. For a male, vision questing within stone is like ritual lovemaking. For a female, it is like being mad love. For a female, it is like being made love to, like back here. And see what I mean? I lay back and gazed up at the ceiling panel, which seemed illuminated in places by a play of sunlight upon different minerals within it and upon small pockmarks and irregularities of its surface, to give the impression of a sky filled with stars. The shaman figures were lively, all carrying sticks or lightning spears, seemingly ready for diminutive intercourse with the cosmos, the rock, the sky, the clouds for rain. There was something thrilling and erotic about the dance of figures on the panel, and as I lay there I felt titillated, joyful, and even wanted to laugh joyfully, as though I were being tickled or flirted with. I could easily envision that in dreaming these sensations could flower into full-fledged ecstasy. See what I mean? Chan whispered, smiling. Potent little guys, I responded. Potent energy, Chan replied. I get the impression that making rain was like the sky having an orgasm, I mused. Out here in the middle of the desert, you'd better believe it. Chan cheered gleefully. We both laughed and sat up with our backs against a stone. What a wonderful spot. I felt fantastic. Not only had I been protected, replenished, and nurtured by the powers there, but also flirted with. I resolved to come back one day on my own and sleep there